#aliens sought assistance, only to face the Deathworlders' fleet. The crystalline halls of the Galactic Council chambers hummed with nervous energy as Ambassador Zethkar of the Velthari Empire approached the central podium. His 6 arms trembled slightly, betraying the fear that his diplomatic training had taught him to hide. Around him, representatives from dozens of species watched with varying degrees of concern etched across their alien features. The holographic display behind him showed a sector map of the Outer Rim territories, where red warning indicators blinked ominously across 17 star systems. Each blinking light represented a world that had gone silent in the past 3 standard cycles. Their populations vanished without explanation. Honored delegates, Zethkar began, his voice carrying through the universal translators. The situation has become desperate. The entity we have come to know as the Devourer continues its relentless advance through our territories. Our combined fleets have proven insufficient. A murmur of discomfort rippled through the assembly. The Velthari possessed one of the most advanced military forces in the known galaxy, with plasma weaponry that could crack moons and shields that had never been breached in conventional warfare. If their technology was insufficient, the implications were terrifying. Counselor Yixha of the Aquatic Dominion spoke up, her gills fluttering with agitation. What exactly do you propose, Ambassador? We have already committed significant resources to this conflict. Our bioships have been enhanced with the latest defensive modifications, yet they barely survived their last encounter with this thing. Zethkar's primary hands clasped together, a gesture of supplication among his species. There is one option we have not yet explored. The Council archives contain records of a species that emerged from the outer territories approximately 200 standard cycles ago. They call themselves humans. The name sent a visible shudder through several delegates. Counselor Morgeth of the Silicon Confederacy, whose rocky form rarely showed emotion, actually took a step backward. You cannot be serious. The Deathworlders? Those barbaric creatures from that nightmare planet they call Earth. I understand the concerns, Zethkar continued, raising his voice slightly. Yes, they originate from a Class 12 death world. Yes, their military doctrine is unconventional, but their combat effectiveness cannot be denied. He gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show archived footage from humanity's first contact with galactic civilization. The images were grainy but clear enough to see sleek metal vessels, unlike anything in the galactic standard design philosophy. Where most ships were elegant curves designed for efficiency and beauty, these human craft were angular, purposeful, bristling with weapon systems that seemed almost crude by galactic standards. They appeared in our space with vessels constructed from refined metals and ceramics, Zethkar explained. No energy shielding, no gravitic manipulation drives, no plasma conduits. Yet when the Kretar hegemony attempted to claim their territory, as they had countless other emerging species, the results were unexpected. The display showed what remained of a Kretar battle fleet after their encounter with the humans. The elegant bio ships, once considered the pinnacle of living vessel technology, drifted lifeless in space. Their hulls were punctured by what appeared to be solid projectiles, an impossibly primitive concept that somehow proved devastatingly effective against advanced organic armor. Kinetic weapons, whispered Counselor Tvera of the Psionic Collective, her mental tendrils recoiling at the memory. They fired solid matter at relativistic speeds. No shields in the galaxy were designed to defend against such brutality. Zethkar nodded gravely. Indeed, while we developed elegant solutions involving energy manipulation and exotic matter, they simply accelerated metal to significant fractions of light speed. When that proved insufficient, they escalated to what their military called nuclear ordnance. Fusion and fission weapons that contaminated entire regions of space with radiation. The assembly fell silent. Nuclear weapons had been abandoned by most species millions of years ago, considered too dangerous and unpredictable for civilized warfare. The concept of deliberately spreading radiation as a weapon was almost unthinkable to most galactic minds. But Perhaps most disturbing, Zethkar continued, was their tactical doctrine. While we engage in honorable combat with agreed-upon rules and limited engagements, humans practice what they term total war. They do not simply seek to disable enemy vessels or achieve tactical objectives. They seek complete and utter destruction of anything they perceive as a threat. The footage changed to show human ground forces in action. Unlike the graceful, energy-based combat preferred by most species, human soldiers moved with mechanical precision, using projectile weapons that tore through conventional defensive systems. They advanced under cover of their own artillery, showing no regard for collateral damage or the aesthetics of battle. They have no concept of surrender, Zethkar added quietly. In every recorded engagement, human forces have fought to the last individual rather than yield. They seem to view death in combat as preferable to defeat. Counselor Yixha's gill slits fluttered rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. This is madness, Zethkar. You propose we invite these monsters into our space? They are everything civilized beings stand against. Are they worse than extinction? Zethkar countered. The Devourer has consumed 17 worlds. Billions of sentient beings simply gone. Not conquered, not enslaved, not even killed in any conventional sense. They just ceased to exist, as if they never were. Our most advanced weapons pass through it harmlessly. Our strongest shields offer no protection. It adapts to every strategy we employ. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the assembly. But humans are different. They do not think like us. They do not fight like us. Perhaps that very barbarity you fear is what we need to face something that defies our understanding of warfare itself. The archives showed more recent intelligence on human development. In the 2 centuries since first contact, they had not remained static. Their technology had evolved, but always along their distinctive path. Where other species developed more efficient energy systems, humans built more powerful reactors. Where others created more sophisticated AI, humans developed more ruthless tactical algorithms. They have established what they call the Terran Defense Force, Zethkar explained. Unlike our fleets, which are designed for patrol and peacekeeping, theirs exists solely for war. Every ship, every weapon, every system is built with one purpose: to destroy anything that threatens humanity or its allies. The display showed intelligence reports on human military assets. Their largest vessels were designated as dreadnoughts, massive constructs that dwarfed even the biggest galactic battleships. But it was not their size that drew gasps from the assembly, it was their armament. Each ship carried enough firepower to sterilize a small moon, and they had dozens of them. Their doctrine has evolved as well, Zethkar continued. They have studied every galactic species, learned our tactics, our weaknesses. They have prepared for wars we cannot even imagine. When the Zephyrian Collective attempted to expand into human space 5 cycles ago, the humans ended the conflict within days. Not through negotiation or limited engagement, but by destroying the Zephyrian home fleet so completely that the survivors immediately requested terms. Counselor Morgeth's rocky form shifted, emitting small grinding sounds that indicated deep thought. Even if we were to contact them, why would they help? They have shown no interest in galactic affairs beyond defending their own borders. They reject council membership, ignore trade agreements, and respond to diplomatic overtures with barely concealed hostility. Zethkar's expression grew grim, because the Devourer is moving toward the galactic core. At its current rate of expansion, it will reach the outer human territories within 50 standard cycles. They may not care about our survival, but they will certainly care about their own. The projection changed to show the Devourer's projected path. The entity moved through space like a living cancer, consuming not just planets, but entire star systems. Matter, energy, even space itself seemed to be absorbed into its growing mass. And its trajectory would indeed bring it into contact with human space. Furthermore, Zethkar added, we have something they want. Our medical technology has always fascinated them. Humans have remarkably short lifespans compared to most galactic species, and their biology is surprisingly fragile despite their aggressive nature. They have attempted to acquire longevity treatments through various means, always unsuccessfully due to biological incompatibility. You suggest we trade our medical knowledge for military assistance? Counselor Tverius' mental tendrils writhed with distaste. Such technology in the hands of those creatures could extend their violent existence indefinitely. The alternative, Zethkar replied flatly, is that there will be no existence at all. The Devourer does not discriminate. It does not negotiate. It simply consumes. The assembly fell into heated discussion, delegates conferring in small groups. The air filled with the sounds of dozens of languages and communication methods as species debated among themselves. Some advocated for continued conventional resistance. Others suggested abandoning the outer territories entirely. But a growing number began to see the terrible logic in Zethkar's proposal. Finally, Counselor Yixos spoke for the assembly. If we were to approach these humans, what guarantee do we have that they will not simply take what they want and leave us to our fate? Or worse, ally themselves with this devourer if it proves more beneficial? Zethkar had anticipated this question, because humans have one trait that separates them from every other species in the galaxy. They form pact bonds not just within their own kind, but with any species they consider allies. Once they accept you into their protection, they will fight for you as fiercely as they fight for themselves. The display showed archived footage of human-led evacuation efforts during various conflicts. Despite their reputation for brutality and warfare, humans consistently risked their own lives to save civilian populations of allied species. They had lost thousands of their own personnel protecting refugees during the Hegemony War, asking nothing in return. They have a saying, Zethkar continued, no one left behind. When humans commit to defending something, they do not calculate odds or consider cost. They simply fight until victory or death. The debate continued for hours, but eventually the mathematics of survival won out. A formal vote was called, and by a narrow margin, the Council authorized contact with the Terran Defense Force. Zethkar felt a mixture of relief and terror as the decision was announced. As the assembly dispersed, Counselor Morgeth approached him privately. The Silicon Confederacy representative's rocky features showed concern. I hope you understand what you have unleashed, Ambassador. Humans are not like us. They do not think in terms of acceptable losses or proportional response. Once they commit to war, they become something terrible to behold. Zitkar nodded slowly. I know, but perhaps terrible is what we need to face the Devourer. Our civilization, our elegant solutions, and honorable conduct have failed. Maybe it is time to try something primitive. The communication array on Council Station began broadcasting on the frequencies humans had provided for emergency contact. The message was simple and direct, as humans preferred. The galaxy faced extinction. The Council requested military assistance. Medical technology would be provided in exchange. The response came within hours, faster than anyone had expected. It was equally direct. Stand by. The fleet is coming. Across the galaxy, massive shipyards that had been dormant for decades suddenly roared to life. The Terran Defense Force began mobilizing assets that most galactic citizens had only heard whispered rumors about. Dreadnoughts emerged from deep space bases, their hulls scarred from countless battles, but their weapons arrays gleaming with lethal promise. But it was not just the regular fleet that began moving toward the outer rim. Deep within the Sol system, automated systems activated protocols that had never been used. The Prometheus Protocol, humanity's final contingency plan for threats beyond conventional response. As news of the mobilization spread through human space, civilian populations began their own preparations. Unlike most galactic species, humans had never forgotten that their survival might depend on their ability to fight. Every colony had militia forces, every transport ship carried weapons, every citizen understood that war might come to their door. The galaxy was about to witness something it had never seen before. Humanity unleashed not in defense of their own borders, but in total war against an existential threat. The elegant, civilized species of the Council had invited the Deathworlders to save them. They had no idea what they had truly asked for. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the TDF Retribution, humanity's newest and most powerful dreadnought, as it prepared to jump to the Outer Rim. Around her, displays showed the massive fleet assembling for what military analysts were already calling the largest deployment in human history. Admiral, her tactical officer, reported, "We're receiving preliminary intelligence from Council forces. Whatever this devourer is, it's unlike anything in our databases." Chen nodded grimly. Throughout human history, they had always found a way to kill their enemies. The galaxy was about to learn that some problems could not be solved with elegance or honor. Some problems required monsters. And humanity had spent 200 years becoming very good monsters indeed. #aliens sought assistance, only to face the Deathworlders fleet. Second part, the Outer Rim Research Station Kepler. 7 had been humanity's most remote outpost until 3 days ago. Now it served as the forward command center for an operation that would have been unthinkable just a week earlier. Admiral Sarah Chun stood before a holographic display showing the largest fleet deployment in human history, her weathered face reflecting the blue glow of tactical readouts. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 30 years turning humanity's aggressive nature into tactical superiority. Commander Martinez, her chief of staff, consulted his datapad. Final elements of Battle Group Omega just completed their jump. We now have 47 dreadnoughts, 231 heavy cruisers, and over 800 smaller vessels in the operational area. Total personnel, 2.7 million. Shin nodded approvingly. The fleet represented nearly 60% of humanity's active military assets, pulled from patrol duties across 200 star systems. But it was not just the ships that made this force unprecedented. Each vessel carried weapons and technologies that the Galactic Council had never seen, systems that violated several interstellar treaties simply by existing. "What's the status of our new allies?" Chen asked, though the word allies carried a bitter taste. Humanity had been rejected, scorned, and isolated by the galactic community for 2 centuries. Now, suddenly, they were desperately needed. "The Council liaison teams are adapting," Martinez replied diplomatically. "The Vel-Theri delegation is aboard the TDF Sovereign. Commander Torres reports they've been asking a lot of questions about our nuclear arsenal." Chen allowed herself a thin smile. The galaxy's elegant species had spent millions of years developing beyond what they considered primitive weapons. Humanity had spent the same time perfecting them. "I'm sure they have. Any word from our scouting missions?" The Wraith Squadron completed their reconnaissance of the Thanatos system yesterday. The footage is disturbing. The holographic display shifted to show real-time intelligence from humanity's most advanced stealth ships. The Wraith-class vessels were invisible to most galactic sensors, their hulls coated with materials that absorbed everything from electromagnetic radiation to exotic particle streams. What they had recorded in the Thanatos system confirmed humanity's worst fears about their new enemy. Where once a thriving star system had existed, now only empty space remained. Not empty in the sense of being lifeless, but literally empty. Planets, asteroids, even the star itself had simply vanished, leaving behind a void that seemed to bend light around its edges. At the center of this impossibility, something moved. The Devourer defied every law of physics that humanity understood. It appeared as a constantly shifting mass of darkness that consumed not just matter and energy, but space itself. Tendrils of pure entropy reached out from its core, touching anything within range, and causing it to simply cease existing. No debris, no energy release, no trace that it had ever been there at all. "Jesus Christ," whispered Lieutenant Patel, the young officer manning the sensor station. "How do you fight something like that?" Chun studied the readings with the cold calculation that had made her humanity's most feared military commander. The same way we fight everything else, Lieutenant. We find a weakness, and then we exploit it until our enemy is dead. But, privately, she wondered if humanity's legendary stubbornness would be enough this time. Every military doctrine they had developed assumed an enemy that followed basic physical laws. This thing seemed to exist outside reality itself. Admiral, the communications officer announced, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Council fleet. Ambassador Zethkar is requesting immediate consultation. Put him through. The holographic display shifted to show the Velthari ambassador, his 6 arms gesticulating nervously. Behind him, Chun could see the elegant curves of a Council command ship, all flowing lines and artistic design. It looked like a sculpture compared to the brutal functionality of human vessels. Admiral Chun, Zethkar began, his translator rendering his words in clipped English, I bring disturbing news. The Devourer has accelerated its advance. We estimate it will reach the Proxima Centauri system within 48 standard hours. Chun felt ice form in her stomach. Proxima Centauri was humanity's oldest colony, home to over 50 million civilians. How is that possible? Our calculations showed we had at least 2 weeks. It appears to grow stronger with each system it consumes. The mass it absorbs is somehow increasing its speed and range. Admiral, if it continues at this rate, it will reach the galactic core within 30 cycles rather than the projected 200. The implications hit Chun like a physical blow. Not only was humanity's time running out, but so was everyone else's. The careful plans they had made for a methodical defensive campaign were useless against an enemy that defied prediction. Admiral, Commander Martinez said quietly, we're receiving emergency transmissions from the Proxima system. They're requesting immediate evacuation support. Chun closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with renewed resolve. Negative. Begin implementation of Protocol 7. A stunned silence fell over the command center. Protocol 7 was humanity's most classified defensive doctrine, developed in absolute secrecy and never tested in actual combat. Even most of the fleet commanders had only theoretical knowledge of its existence. Admiral, Martinez said carefully, Protocol 7 has never been authorized for use against an unknown entity. The risk factors are acceptable. Chun cut him off. We don't have time for conventional engagement. Zethkar, I need you to order all Council forces to maintain a minimum distance of 5 astronomical units from the Devourer. No exceptions. The Velthari ambassador's features showed confusion. Admiral, at that distance, our weapons will be completely ineffective. How do you propose to dash? Just trust me, Chun interrupted. And pray that your gods have a sense of humor. She turned to her staff. Begin Phase 1 deployment. I want the Prometheus array online within 6 hours. All dreadnoughts are to begin charging their primary systems. And give me a direct line to Earth Command. As her orders spread through the fleet, humanity's true nature began to reveal itself. For 2 centuries, they had hidden the full extent of their capabilities from the galaxy, allowing other species to see only their conventional forces. The elegant civilizations of the Council had assumed that human military doctrine was simply crude and primitive. They had no idea how wrong they were. Deep within the hull of the TDF Retribution, systems that had never been used outside of simulation came online. The ship's massive fusion reactors ramped up to maximum output, feeding power to weapons arrays that had been designed not to defeat enemy fleets, but to crack planets. Around the fleet, 46 other dreadnoughts began the same process. On the bridge, Chun watched as her communications officer established the encrypted connection to Earth. The face that appeared on the main screen belonged to Fleet Admiral Jackson, humanity's highest military authority and one of the few people who fully understood what Protocol 7 entailed. Admiral Chun, Jackson began without preamble, I've received your request for authorization. Are you absolutely certain this is necessary? Sir, we're facing an enemy that consumes matter and energy on a stellar scale. Conventional weapons pass through it without effect. If we don't stop it at Proxima Centauri, it will reach Earth within 50 days. Jackson was silent for several seconds, weighing the implications. Protocol 7 had been developed as humanity's ultimate deterrent, a weapon so terrible that its very existence was kept secret from both enemies and allies. Using it would reveal capabilities that could make humanity the most feared species in the galaxy. Very well, Jackson said finally. Authorization granted. God help us all. The connection ended, and Chun turned to face her staff. Each of them understood what they were about to witness. For the first time in human history, they would deploy weapons designed not to win a war, but to end the possibility of war entirely. Begin final preparations, Chun ordered, and sent a message to all civilian populations in the Proxima system. They have 6 hours to reach minimum safe distance. Meanwhile, aboard the Council Command ship, Ambassador Zethkar watched the human fleet's movements with growing unease. The elegant formations that galactic militaries preferred had given way to something far more ominous. Human ships moved with mechanical precision into a configuration that looked less like a battle formation and more like a ritual pattern. What are they doing? Counselor Yixha asked, her gills fluttering with agitation. Those positions make no tactical sense. Zethkar studied the human fleet through his ship's sensors. Each dreadnought had taken position at specific coordinates, forming what appeared to be a geometric pattern on a massive scale. Between them, smaller vessels created connecting lines of fire support. The entire formation stretched across several light minutes of space. I do not know, he admitted, but I'm beginning to think we have gravely underestimated what humans consider acceptable tactics. His fears were confirmed when the first phase of Protocol 7 began. Across the human fleet, massive hatches opened on the dreadnought's hulls, revealing weapons systems that defied galactic understanding. Instead of the elegant energy projectors used by most species, these were crude, mechanical devices that looked like artillery pieces scaled up to impossibility. Stellar bombardment cannons, whispered the ship's tactical analyst, a young Velthari engineer who had studied human technology. Theoretical weapons designed to accelerate matter to significant fractions of light speed using fusion-powered magnetic acceleration. Theoretical? Zethkar asked. Not anymore. The human dreadnoughts began firing in sequence, their massive guns launching projectiles that registered on sensors as solid matter traveling at nearly 20% of light speed. But these are not ordinary kinetic weapons. Each projectile was a carefully designed package containing exotic matter that had been theorized but never successfully weaponized by galactic science. Strange matter, the analyst breathed. They're firing strange matter shells. Zethkar felt his blood freeze. Strange matter was one of the few substances in the universe that could theoretically interact with the kind of exotic physics the Devourer seemed to employ. But it was also incredibly dangerous, capable of converting normal matter into more strange matter on contact. The humans were essentially firing miniature reality bombs at their target. As the projectiles raced toward the Devourer at relativistic speeds, the human fleet maintained perfect formation. But this was only the first phase. On the flagship, Admiral Chun watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Time to impact. 17 minutes, 40 seconds, came the reply. Begin Phase 2. Throughout the fleet, a second weapons system began charging. These are not kinetic weapons, but something far stranger. Each dreadnought mounted what human scientists called quantum disruptors, devices that could temporarily destabilize the fundamental forces that held matter together. They had been developed as a theoretical response to enemies that existed partially outside normal space-time. The galaxy was about to learn that humans did not just prepare for the wars they could imagine. They prepared for the wars that their nightmares suggested might be possible. Admiral, the sensor officer reported, the Devourer is beginning to react to our incoming projectiles. It's changing somehow. On the display, the massive entity began to shift its form, tendrils of darkness reaching out to intercept the strange matter shells. When the first projectile made contact, the result was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Reality itself seemed to convulse around the impact point. The Devourer's matter-consuming field flickered and distorted, and for the first time since its appearance, something it had tried to absorb remained intact. The strange matter shell had somehow disrupted its ability to consume normal matter, creating a wound in its seemingly invulnerable surface. "It's working," someone whispered on the bridge. But Chen knew this was only the beginning. The Devourer was adapting, learning from the attack. They would have one chance to deploy the full Protocol 7 arsenal before their enemy evolved countermeasures. "All ships, fire when ready," she ordered. Across the human fleet, every dreadnought opened fire simultaneously. Strange matter shells, quantum disruptors, and weapons that existed only in humanity's darkest theories unleashed their fury upon an enemy that had seemed invincible just moments before. The galaxy watched in silent terror as the Deathworlders revealed what they had been building in secret for 2 centuries. This was not warfare as civilized species understood it. This was the systematic application of humanity's greatest talent, turning nightmares into reality. And they were very, very good at it. #aliens sought assistance, only to face the Deathworlders' fleet. Third part the space around the dying Thanatos system erupted into chaos as humanity's ultimate weapons found their mark. The Devourer, which had consumed 17 star systems without taking a single point of damage, now writhed in what could only be described as pain. Strange matter shells tore through its reality-bending defenses, while quantum disruptors created wounds in space itself. Admiral Chun watched the tactical display with the cold satisfaction of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. Around her, the bridge crew worked with mechanical efficiency, feeding targeting data to weapons systems that most galactic species would consider crimes against physics. "Damage assessment," she ordered. Lieutenant Commander Park, her weapons officer, consulted his readings. "Direct hits with 73% of our strange matter ordnance. The quantum disruptors have created 12 major temporal distortions in the target's outer shell. Whatever that thing is made of, we're hurting it." For the first time since the crisis began, Chen allowed herself a moment of hope. But it was short-lived. On the display, the Devourer began to change, its dark mass shifting and adapting to the human assault. Where strange matter had wounded it, new defensive structures emerged, creating barriers that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. "It's learning," Park reported grimly. "The quantum signatures are shifting. It's adapting to our weapons in real time." Chen had expected this. No enemy humanity had ever faced had been stupid, and she doubted this cosmic horror would be any different. That was why Protocol 7 consisted of multiple phases, each designed to exploit different vulnerabilities before the enemy could adapt. "Begin Phase 3, she commanded. Across the human fleet, a new weapon system activated. These were not kinetic projectiles or exotic energy weapons, but something far more insidious. Humanity had learned much about biological warfare over their violent history, and they had applied those lessons to cosmic scales. Von Neumann swarm deployment, Park announced. Throughout the fleet, specialized launchers released clouds of microscopic machines, each one a self-replicating robot designed for a single purpose, to consume and convert matter into more copies of itself. But these are not ordinary nanomachines. Human engineers had modified them to feed specifically on the exotic matter that comprised the Devourer's structure. The galaxy's civilized species had banned such weapons eons ago, considering them too dangerous for any practical use. Humanity had never signed those treaties. Ambassador Zethkar watched in horror from his command ship as the mechanical swarms spread toward their target like a plague made visible. What were they doing? Those devices could consume entire star systems if they malfunction. His tactical analyst's voice trembled as he replied, "I believe that is the point, Ambassador. The humans are not trying to defeat the Devourer. They're trying to out-evolve it." The truth of that statement became clear as the nanomachine swarms made contact with their target. Unlike the previous weapons, these did not cause immediate damage. Instead, They began the slow process of converting the Devourer's matter into more nanomachines, essentially turning the entity's own mass against itself. But the Devourer was not passive. As a mechanical plague spread across its surface, tendrils of pure entropy lashed out toward the human fleet. Where they touched, ships simply ceased to exist, their crews dying before they could even register what was happening. Evasive maneuvers, Chen ordered. All ships maintain formation, but begin random vector changes. Do not let those tendrils get a lock on us. The human fleet began a deadly dance, their ships moving in patterns that seemed chaotic, but were actually carefully calculated to avoid the Devourer's attacks. This was another advantage of human military doctrine, where other species relied on shields and energy barriers for protection. Humans had developed the philosophy that the best defense was not being where the enemy expected you to be. Even so, losses mounted quickly. 3 destroyers vanished in the first few minutes, their crews erased from existence without even debris to mark their passing. A heavy cruiser took a grazing hit from one of the tendrils and simply stopped, its hull aging decades and seconds before crumbling to dust. Casualties? Chen asked. 11,000 personnel lost in the last 5 minutes, Commander Martinez reported. But the nanomachine assault is working. The Devourer has lost approximately 8% of its total mass. Chen nodded grimly. By the standards of galactic warfare, losing 11,000 soldiers in minutes would be considered catastrophic. By human standards, it was acceptable losses for a strategic victory. This was another aspect of humanity that the galaxy found incomprehensible. Their willingness to accept casualties that would break most species will to fight. As the battle continued, more Council ships arrived in the system. Velthari battlecruisers, aquatic Dominion bioships, and Silicon Confederacy crystal vessels took positions at the safe distance Admiral Chun had specified. But their elegant weapons remained silent. What use were plasma beams and exotic energy projectors against an enemy that consumed energy itself? Admiral, the communications officer announced, we're receiving multiple priority transmissions from Council forces. They're requesting permission to engage. She didn't even look up from the tactical display. Denied. Their weapons will only feed that thing's power. Have them focus on search and rescue operations. It was a harsh dismissal, but Chen knew the mathematics of the situation. The Council's elegant, efficient weapons were useless here. This was exactly the kind of enemy that required humanity's brutal approach to warfare, overwhelming firepower applied, without mercy or restraint. Phase 4 initiation in 30 seconds, Park reported. Chen took a deep breath. Phase 4 was the most dangerous part of Protocol 7, not for the enemy, but for everyone in the surrounding star systems. Humanity was about to deploy weapons that could theoretically damage space-time itself. All personnel, prepare for temporal distortion effects, she announced ship-wide. Secure all equipment and prepare for possible timeline fragmentation. The weapons that activated next defied every treaty the galaxy had ever written about acceptable military technology. Temporal disruptors designed to age their targets to death in seconds. Probability manipulators that made enemy weapons malfunction by changing the fundamental constants of physics in localized areas. Reality bombs that temporarily replaced normal physics with versions more favorable to human survival. The Devourer's response was immediate and terrifying. As human weapons began manipulating time and probability around it, the entity released a pulse of pure entropy that traveled at the speed of light in all directions. When it reached the human fleet, the effects were immediate. Ships began aging rapidly, their hulls developing stress fractures as decades of wear appeared in seconds. Electronic systems failed as quantum processes that should have been stable became chaotic. Several smaller vessels simply fell apart as the molecular bonds holding their hulls together degraded. But the human fleet held together. Unlike the elegant ships of the Council, human vessels were built with redundancy upon redundancy. When their primary systems failed, secondary systems activated. When those failed, tertiary systems took over. When everything else was gone, human crews could still fight with emergency power and manual controls. Hull integrity down to 60%, the damage control officer reported. We've lost primary power on decks 12 through 15. The port hangar bay has been sealed due to structural collapse. Can we still fight? Chen asked. Yes, ma'am. All primary weapons systems remain operational. Chen smiled grimly. That was humanity in a nutshell. They could be dying, their ships falling apart around them, and they would still find a way to keep fighting. On the tactical display, the Devourer was clearly in distress. The combined assault of strange matter, quantum disruptors, nanomachine swarms, and reality-warping weapons had reduced its mass by nearly 30%. But it was still adapting, still learning, still fighting back. Admiral, Lieutenant Patel reported, long-range sensors are detecting massive gravitational distortions around the target. I think it's trying to collapse local space-time. Chun felt her blood run cold. A gravitational collapse would create a black hole, effectively removing the Devourer from normal space-time, but also destroying everything within several light years, including the human fleet. Time to collapse? Approximately 7 minutes at current rate of distortion. 7 minutes to either defeat an enemy that had consumed star systems or die trying. For most species, this would be the moment to retreat, to preserve what forces they could, and try again later. For humanity, it was simply another tactical challenge. Begin Phase 5, Chen ordered. The final phase of Protocol 7 was not really a weapon at all. It was a calculated risk based on humanity's greatest strength, their absolute refusal to accept defeat. Throughout the fleet, every ship began redirecting all available power to their reactors. Not to weapons or shields or engines, but to a process the human scientists had dubbed stellar ignition. Each vessel would become a miniature star, converting its own mass into energy in a controlled fusion reaction. Admiral, Commander Martinez said quietly, you realize this would destroy the entire fleet. I know, Chen replied. Signal all ships. Volunteers only for Phase 5 implementation. The response came back within seconds. Every single ship in the fleet volunteered. This was perhaps the most human moment of the entire battle. Faced with certain death, surrounded by an enemy that defied understanding, 47 dreadnoughts, and their crews chose to become weapons themselves rather than retreat. Stellar ignition in 3 minutes, Park reported. All ships report ready for final phase. Chen opened a communication channel to the entire fleet. This is Admiral Chun. Today we face an enemy that threatens not just humanity, but all life in the galaxy. The civilized species called us Deathworlders, barbarians, monsters. Today, we prove them right. Today, we become the monsters that monsters fear. She paused, looking at her crew one last time. It has been an honor serving with all of you. May history remember that when the darkness came, humanity chose to burn rather than bow. The countdown reached 0. Across the human fleet, 47 fusion reactors went critical simultaneously, each one converting its ship's mass into pure energy. The combined output was equivalent to a medium-sized star going supernova. But this was not random destruction. Human engineers had calculated the exact energy frequencies and patterns needed to disrupt the exotic matter that comprised the Devourer structure. The stellar ignition was aimed, focused, concentrated into a beam of pure annihilation. The result was visible from neighboring star systems. Space itself seemed to catch fire as the human fleet died in a blaze of nuclear glory. The Devourer, caught at the epicenter of the artificial supernova, began to disintegrate as its fundamental structure was overwhelmed by forces it could not absorb or adapt to. For a moment that lasted eternity, the space around Thanatos was filled with light brighter than 1,000 suns. When it faded, both the human fleet and the Devourer were gone, leaving only empty space and the slowly dispersing energy of their mutual destruction. Ambassador Zethkar stared at the empty space where the human fleet had been just moments before. Around him, his crew worked in stunned silence, trying to process what they had witnessed. Sir, his communications officer reported. "We're receiving emergency transmissions from monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. The Devourer's energy signature has completely disappeared. All indications are that the entity has been destroyed." Zitkar nodded slowly. The humans had done what the combined might of galactic civilization could not. They had found a way to kill the unkillable. But the price. "Casualty report," he requested. "Complete loss of the human fleet. 2.7 million personnel. No survivors detected." The ambassador closed his eyes. Humanity had saved the galaxy by sacrificing themselves entirely. It was perhaps the most human thing they could have done, turning their own destruction into a weapon against their enemies. But as the Council ships began broadcasting news of the victory throughout galactic space, none of them noticed the small, stealth objects that had been ejected from the human ships just before their stellar ignition. Escape pods, moving too fast and too quietly for most sensors to detect. Admiral Chun and a handful of survivors from each ship drifted through space in emergency shelters, watching the afterglow of their fleet's sacrifice. The galaxy thought humanity had destroyed itself to save them. They had no idea that humans always had a backup plan, and they definitely had no idea what humanity would do when they learned that the Devourer had not been alone. #aliens sought assistance, only to face the Deathworlders' fleet. Fourth part 6 days after the Battle of Thanatos. The galaxy celebrated its salvation while Admiral Sarachin floated in the cramped confines of an emergency pod, very much alive and very much angry. Around her, the survivors of humanity's greatest military sacrifice listened to galactic news broadcasts with expressions that ranged from bitter amusement to cold rage. "The Council has declared 3 days of celebration," reported Lieutenant Commander Parr from his own pod. "They're calling it Victory Day, commemorating the brave sacrifice of humanity in defense of galactic civilization." Chen's laugh held no humor. "How generous of them. I wonder if they'll mention that we're extinct now." The escape pod's long-range sensors have been monitoring galactic communications for days. The story being told was simple and politically convenient. Humanity had heroically sacrificed itself to save the galaxy from the Devourer. The Deathworlders were dead, the threat was ended, and civilized species could return to their elegant, peaceful existence. None of them had bothered to search for survivors. "Admiral," Chief Petty Officer Williams called from the pod's communication station. "We're receiving a coded transmission on emergency frequency 7. It's from the Wraith Squadron." Chun felt her pulse quicken. The Wraith Squadron had been humanity's deepest reconnaissance unit, their stealth ships so advanced that they could operate undetected even in the heart of enemy space. If they had survived, put them through. The voice that emerged from the speakers belonged to Commander Torres, humanity's best deep space scout. "Admiral, thank God you made it. We've been monitoring the situation from our position in the Void Between." The Void Between was what humans called the dark space between galactic arms, regions so empty that even light took centuries to cross them. It was the perfect place to hide. "Status report, Commander. We have 47 ships operational, mostly scouts and stealth frigates. About 12,000 personnel total. But, Admiral, we've got a problem. A big one." Chen's blood chilled. "The Devourer isn't dead. Worse, there are 3 more of them, moving in from intergalactic space. Whatever we killed was just a scout. The main force is still coming." The escape pod fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Chen stared at the tactical display that showed 3 massive entities approaching the galaxy from different vectors, each one larger than the original Devourer. "Estimated time to galactic contact?" she asked. "The lead entity will reach the outer rim in 72 hours. Admiral, the Council forces have stood down. They think the threat is over. They're completely unprepared." Chun closed her eyes and did the mathematics. 3 entities, each more powerful than the one that had required humanity's entire fleet to destroy. The galaxy's remaining military forces were scattered, celebrating victory instead of preparing for war. And humanity, the only species that had proven capable of fighting these things, was officially extinct. Torres, what's the status of the Prometheus Protocol reserves? There was a pause before the commander replied. All deep space weapons platforms are intact. The enemy never detected them. We still have the Omega contingency available. The Omega contingency. Even among the classified horrors of humanity's military arsenal, it stood alone in its terrifying implications. Where Protocol 7 had been designed to destroy enemies through overwhelming force, Omega was designed for something far worse, ensuring that if humanity died, their enemies would regret it for eternity. Admiral, Park spoke up quietly. Are we really considering this? The galactic species may not trust us, but they're not our enemies. Chen stared out the pod's small viewport at the distant stars. They abandoned us to die, Park. They celebrated our extinction. They left us floating in space like garbage while they threw parties. And now, when the real threat arrives, they'll come crawling back asking for help again. She was quiet for a long moment, weighing decisions that would affect the survival of trillions of beings across hundreds of species. Finally, she spoke. Torres, begin moving your ships toward the approaching entities. Establish monitoring stations, but do not engage. I want to know everything about these things before we make our next move. Understood, Admiral. What about contact with the Council? Let them figure out on their own for now. Maybe facing extinction will teach them to appreciate what they had. Over the next 24 hours, humanity's survivors watched as the galaxy's celebration turned to panic. The first detection of the incoming entities came from an automated monitoring station in the Outer Rim, its sensors picking up gravitational distortions that defied explanation. Within hours, the same council chambers that had reluctantly authorized contact with humanity were in chaos. Ambassador Zethkar stood before the assembled delegates, his 6 arms trembling as he delivered news that no one wanted to hear. The threat has not passed, he announced. Long-range sensors have detected 3 additional entities approaching from intergalactic space. Each one appears significantly larger than the devourer we encountered. The assembly erupted into frantic discussion. Counselor Yixha of the Aquatic Dominion was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. We need to contact the humans immediately. They're the only ones who have successfully engaged these entities. The humans are dead, Counselor Morgeth reminded her. They sacrificed themselves to save us. Their entire fleet was destroyed in the stellar ignition that eliminated the first entity. Then, we need to contact their homeworld, Yixha insisted. They must have other military assets, other fleets we can call upon. Zethkar's expression grew grim. I have been in communication with Earth Command for the past 6 hours. The response was illuminating. The holographic display activated, showing a recorded message from Fleet Admiral Jackson. His face was stone cold as he delivered humanity's official response to the galactic crisis. The Terran Defense Force regrets to inform the Galactic Council that humanity has no remaining military assets capable of engaging cosmic-scale threats. Our entire deep space fleet was committed to the Thanatos operation and was lost with all hands. Earth and our inner colonies maintain only minimal patrol forces suitable for local defense. Jackson paused, his eyes seeming to stare directly at the council delegates through the recording. We wish the council luck in defending themselves against the remaining entities. Perhaps your elegant weapons and civilized tactics will prove more effective than our primitive methods. The message ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. The galaxy's saviors were gone, and their homeworld was offering nothing but cold condolences. What the council didn't know was that Admiral Jackson was speaking from a bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps, where humanity's shadow government had been planning for this exact scenario for decades. The survival of the species had always been humanity's primary concern, and they had prepared for the possibility that their enemies might not stop with a single scout. Sir, one of Jackson's aides reported, Admiral Chen's survivor pods have been recovered by the Wraith Squadron. She's requesting authorization for the Omega contingency. Jackson stared at the tactical displays showing the approaching entities. Each one was the size of a small moon, their dark matter composition suggesting capabilities far beyond the original Devourer. The galaxy's elegant civilizations would be utterly helpless against them. What's the projected casualty count if we implement Omega? He asked. Conservative estimates suggest 60% galactic population loss. Aggressive estimates approach 90%. Jackson nodded slowly. Omega had been designed as humanity's final revenge against a galaxy that had never accepted them. It would save civilization, but the cost would be almost everything that made civilization worth saving. Denied for now, he said finally. Give Chun authorization for reconnaissance and tactical assessment only. If the galaxy wants our help this time, they're going to have to ask properly. Meanwhile, aboard the stealth ship TDF Phantom, Admiral Chun watched as the first of the new entities reached the Outer Rim territories. Unlike the original Devourer, this one didn't simply consume star systems. It transformed them. Jesus, whispered Commander Torres as they observed the entity's attack on the Kepler system. It's not destroying the planets. It's converting them. The display showed a process that defied understanding. As the entity's tendrils touched each world, the planet's matter began to shift and change. Continents reformed themselves into geometric patterns. Oceans became flowing circuits of liquid metal, and the very atmosphere began to pulse with artificial rhythms. It's turning them into machines, Chen realized. Or something like machines. It's creating infrastructure. For what? Torres asked. Chen's expression darkened as she understood the implications. For invasion. The first one was a scout. These aren't destroyers. They're terraformers preparing the galaxy for something else. As if summoned by her words, the long-range sensors began detecting new signals from the edge of the galaxy. Ships, millions of them, moving in formations that stretched across light years. Whatever species controlled the Devourers was coming, and they were bringing an invasion fleet that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever imagined. Admiral, the communications officer reported, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. It's encoded with Omega authorization protocols. Chun accepted the transmission, knowing what it would contain. Admiral Jackson's face appeared on the screen, his expression grave. Chun, I've been monitoring your reconnaissance data. The situation is worse than we anticipated. The Council is requesting emergency assistance, but they're still trying to dictate terms. They want our help, but they refuse to acknowledge our authority or accept our methods. What are your orders, sir? Jackson was quiet for several seconds before responding. The galaxy had its chance to treat us as equals. They chose to see us as monsters until they needed monsters. Now they'll learn what monsters we really are. The transmission ended, and Chen found herself staring at the activation codes for humanity's most terrible weapon. Omega wasn't just a military protocol. It was humanity's promise that if they were going to be treated as the galaxy's monsters, they would be the most effective monsters possible. Admiral, Torres asked quietly, what are we going to do? Chen looked at the tactical display showing 3 world-eating entities and an invasion fleet beyond imagination. The galaxy had less than 48 hours before the real war began, and they still thought humanity was extinct. We're going to save them, she said finally. All of them, even if they hate us for how we do it. She began entering the Omega activation codes. And then we're going to have a very serious conversation about what gratitude looks like. In the distance, the galaxy's elegant civilizations prepared for war with weapons designed for peace and honor. They had no idea that their salvation would come from the ghosts of the species they had abandoned to die. Humanity was about to remind the universe why Deathworlders were called that in the first place.